Can we pretend that turbines in the blue sky like our windmills? I could really use the wind right now, wind right now.
We're middle school students from Moses Lake, Washington, and Lake Zurich, Illinois, and we've been researching a real-world problem. Grown-ups asking kids to solve a problem they've created. Maybe if they'd asked us in the first place, we wouldn't even be in this mess.
Anyway, the challenge was to collaborate across 2 time zones and more than 1,800 miles to learn which forms of energy best serves the needs of our community. That's not a simple problem to solve when we need to consider the risks and benefits to our society.
Our teachers, Mrs. Frederick and Mrs. Dooms, were able to design this challenge thanks to the Siemens Foundation and Discovery Education. Last summer, they met in Washington, D.C., where they spent a week learning how science, technology, engineering, and math are used to solve global problems. Those 5 days not only brought Mrs. Frederick and Mrs. Dooms together, it brought our 2 classes together as well.
The challenge was in 2 phases. In the first phase, we researched various sources of energy and how it got converted into electricity. In the second phase, we looked more closely at wind power by building and testing model wind turbines.
The first thing we did was research coal, wind, hydro, and nuclear power and learned a lot. For example, Chicago gets a lot of its electricity from coal-fired or nuclear power plants. Coal is a fossil fuel and it's not a clean energy. When we examined nuclear power, we learned it's a tremendous source of energy, but there are some safety concerns. In Moses Lake, a lot of electricity comes from hydroelectric dams and some wind power. People living in Moses Lake are debating the environmental and economic impact of one form of energy over the other.
Our classes were able to share this research on Edmodo. It was awesome being able to collaborate this way. In Edmodo, we were assigned groups where we held discussions, posted information, and updated each other on our progress. We were able to share our research within our class as well as with our fellow students 1,800 miles away.
When we weren't Edmodoing, we had opportunities to Skype. Students from Chicago met face-to-face with their Washington classmates to fill the conversation we had back on Edmodo. It also gave kids from Chicago an opportunity to provide feedback on prezzies made by the Moses Lake students.
So then what's going to happen is that, they'll turn it on and they'll hook up the turbine to this. Okay.
The second phase was equally important. Just as Moses Lake has controversies about installing wind farms to replace the hydroelectric dam in Chicago, there is a suburb called Evanston that is looking into building wind turbines in Lake Michigan.
Since both communities are looking at wind energy, we thought we'd do our own investigation. But instead of researching using internet and books, we were given the opportunity to do some hands-on learning. Mrs. Frederick and Mrs. Dooms presented us with the challenge of building model wind turbines, testing our design, and communicating our results to an authentic audience using technology tools.
Since the wind turbine kits weren't a part of our school budgets, we need to find the funds to purchase them. Getting mini grants was the answer. The kids in Moses Lake helped write a grant for their kits, and in Lake Zurich, the class received a grant from Illinois State University Center for Math, Science, and Technology.
Now we were able to build and test. Before we assembled the kits, we needed to make sure we had everything we needed. So we met in groups to figure out our supplies and any other testing equipment that was necessary for the project. Then, as scientists and mathematicians would do in real life, we came up with a way to collect our data that would include any variables in our testing.
This was a real hands-on approach to learning that made this project worthwhile. When our testing was complete, we gathered all our data and compared the results with other groups, as well as the other school.
The entire project was incredibly special. We researched, we designed, but most of all, we collaborated. And our local communities have learned about our work. In Moses Lake, an article was written about the challenge in the local newspaper. And in Chicago, the Lake Zurich School District website featured the project on its curriculum webpage.
Of course, not everything went according to plan. For example, the student audio recording for this paragraph was garbled, so now you're listening to me. In addition, Mrs. Frederick and I wanted to include an Edmodo discussion on the book The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, but we ran out of time. Then, separate snowstorms closed both Moses Lake and Lake Zurich schools, and that delayed a Skype conversation.
But despite those glitches, the project went smoothly. We thank the Siemens Foundation and Discovery Education for bringing us together. We also thank Illinois State University's Center for Math, Science, and Technology for their generous grant.
Hi, this is Sarah, and I'm going to be interviewing Jared. Jared, what was the most frustrating part of the engineering group?
The most frustrating part of the engineering group was making the Prezi. It took a lot of time, but it was well worth it.
What was the most exciting part?
The most exciting part was building the wind turbines.
Can we pretend that turbines in the blue sky like white windmills? I could really use the wind right now, wind right now, wind right now. Can we pretend that turbines in the blue sky like white windmills? I could really use the wind right now, wind right now, wind right now. After all the thinking too many for energy, we use hydro, wind, and coal as you can see. Can we pretend that turbines in the blue sky like white windmills? I could really use the wind right now, wind right now, wind right now.